Let me start by saying this. I've always believed in the paranormal. Growing up, I loved listening to and reading scary stories. So it kind of bummed me out that I'd never had any solid paranormal experience of my own. Sure, I had odd moments, like seeing something flicker in the corner of my eye or feeling uneasy in certain places. But I could always blame that on overthinking or paranoia. That is, until a series of strange and genuinely frightening events happened to me. About 6 years ago, before COVID hit, I landed a clerical job at my alma mater Center for Cultural Affairs. The department manages 3 cultural performing groups, a marching band, a chorale, and a dance troupe. Since all the members were either students or part-time trainers, and our director was usually tied up with other projects, I was often alone in the office. Our office was located far from the main university campus, in this old house that used to be a private family home around World War II. The original owners eventually moved away, and the university purchased the property back when it was a newly established institution. The house was first used as an elementary school in the 1960s, but when the elementary division relocated to a new building on the main campus, the old house was left abandoned for over a decade. Eventually, it was renovated and repurposed as a small museum, which our department also oversees. To help you understand what happened later, let me briefly describe the house's layout. It was a 2-story colonial-style house made of wood, with large windows that wrapped around both floors and opened outward. On the ground floor was a main hall where we usually held external exhibits. Local artists often rented the space for their personal shows. To the left side of the hall, there was a doorway that led to a small kitchen and dining area, which also housed the restrooms. On the right side of the main hall, a wooden staircase led to the second floor, where there was another exhibit area, along with our office. At the back of the second floor, there was a door that opened to an emergency staircase leading outside the building. Nothing strange happened when I first started working there. Still, whenever I met colleagues on the main campus and told them where I worked, they'd always ask me the same thing. Have you experienced anything yet in that house? At first, it unsettled me a bit, especially because it wasn't just 1 or 2 people saying it. Almost everyone who found out I worked at the museum asked the exact same question. Since I hadn't noticed anything odd myself, I brushed it off and eventually forgot about it. That is, until things actually started happening. My first strange encounter occurred about a month after I started the job. It was closing time, and the sky was beginning to darken. I had locked up every window, every door, and was about to leave the front entrance when I suddenly felt the need to use the bathroom. So I went back inside, not bothering to turn the lights on since there was still enough natural light to see. I made my way to one of the restrooms. The bathroom was laid out like this. When you opened the creaky door, the toilet was directly in front of you, and the sink was to your right. I stepped in, locked the door, just like I always do, and turned around to lift the toilet lid. But when I turned again to sit down, I saw that the door was wide open. Now, that door was so creaky you could hear it opening or closing even from the second floor. But this time, I hadn't heard a single sound. I was absolutely sure I'd locked it, just like I lock every bathroom door I've ever used. Yet there it was, swung open like it had never been closed at all. In a panic, I blurted out, can I just use the bathroom real quick? I promise I'll leave as soon as I'm done. I shut the door, quickly finished up, and ran out of the house without once looking back, too afraid of what I might see. After that day, odd things started to happen more regularly. I'd hear the wooden floors creaking, like someone was walking around, even though I was the only one in the building. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps coming up the stairs, only to find no one there when I checked. One time, while sweeping the floor, a large picture frame hanging on the wall started to tremble. At first, I thought maybe I had accidentally nudged it, but it was so heavy that it would have taken a strong shake to make it move at all. I considered maybe there had been a mild earthquake, but the other frames in the hall hadn't moved. Only that one had. But the most consistent thing of all was the overwhelming feeling that I was never alone in that house. It always felt like someone or something was there quietly watching. After a few months, I got used to it. I never saw anything outright, and nothing ever hurt me. The weird events weren't frequent enough to really worry me, so I learned to live with it. That was until something happened that truly terrified me. I should have mentioned earlier, there was a security station near the property gate, a short distance from the house, but still within the museum grounds. One day, bored and looking for a break, I went to chat with the guard on duty. She was a kind woman in her late 50s, and we always got along well. While we were talking, she told me something that made the hair on my arms stand up. You see, the house has those large windows wrapping around both floors, and from the right distance, you can see straight inside. She told me that just a day before, she had been sitting at her post, casually writing in the logbook, when she happened to glance up at the second floor of the house. That's when she saw me, or someone who looked exactly like me, wearing a white dress, walking from one side of the windows to the other. Not even a full minute later, she heard laughter coming from the ground floor of the museum. Curious, she looked down, and there I was chatting with one of the part-time staff who had dropped by that day. I don't remember exactly what I was wearing, but I know for certain it wasn't a dress, and definitely not a white one. Shocked, she looked back up to the second floor, but whoever or whatever she had seen was already gone. She said she immediately made the sign of the cross and whispered a quick prayer. When I heard that, a wave of fear crashed over me. My paranoia spiked so badly that for the next few days, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always feeling like something was right behind me. Then, fortunately or unfortunately, COVID hit and the whole country went into lockdown. We shifted to remote work for several months. When in-person work finally resumed, I was reassigned to a different department, this one located inside the main campus. I never returned to that old, haunted museum after that, and honestly, I don't think I ever will, not after finding out that whatever lives there had taken on my appearance. Summer of the Chupacabra. I grew up on our family farm in Chihuahua, about 2 hours south of Ciudad Juarez. It wasn't large by commercial standards, but to us kids, it felt like it stretched on forever. 20 acres filled with hard work and deep-rooted family history. My father, Roelio, inherited the land from his father, who had built the modest adobe house where I spent my childhood with my parents, my older brother Ernesto, and my younger sister Dals. When we noticed the blood, not much, just small, dark droplets leading away from the goat pen toward the southern edge of our land, where the desert began. I asked my mother what she thought had happened. She said she didn't know, but her face had gone pale, and she made the sign of the cross when she thought I wasn't looking. My father and Ernesto returned later that afternoon, grim-faced and exhausted. They had found the 3 goats nearly a mile into the desert, or rather, they found what was left of them. I wasn't allowed to see, but I overheard my father telling my mother that the goats had been drained of blood. The same paired puncture wounds we had seen on the peaches were on the goats, but larger and more numerous. There were no signs that the bodies had been eaten. They hadn't been attacked to feed. They had been systematically drained. The corpses were completely dry. That night, we locked every animal inside the barn, even the chickens. My father and Ernesto took turns keeping watch from the porch, rifle in hand. I watched from my bedroom window as they passed a thermos of coffee back and forth. I could see their faces briefly each time they lit a cigarette, a habit my father had given up years ago, but resumed that night. The next morning, my father drove into town. When he returned, he brought back heavy chains and new locks for all the outbuildings. But that wasn't all. He also brought back Tio Mateo, my mother's brother, who worked as a ranger at the nearby national park. My uncle had decades of experience with predators and knew the local wildlife better than anyone. He examined what little evidence remained, the odd tracks my father had found near the goat pen, the disturbing pattern of the wounds, as described by my father. I sat on the porch steps, pretending to shell peas while eavesdropping on their conversation. My uncle said he had never seen an animal kill like that, not in over 20 years working in the wilderness. Mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, they killed to eat. This was something else entirely. He mentioned that there had been similar reports further south, near the park where he worked. Livestock killed, drained of blood, always with the same distinctive wounds. Some of the local ranchers were saying it was a chupacabra. My father laughed, but the sound was dry and humorless. Stories to scare children, he muttered. My uncle didn't argue, but he didn't laugh either. He stayed with us that night. He and my father sat up together, rifles across their laps and a bottle of tequila between them. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing happened. We remained on high alert, but as the days passed quietly, we began to relax, just a little. Then my abuela arrived for her usual summer visit. She came carrying bundles of herbs and small cloth pouches filled with salt, which she hung above every doorway. Despite my father's protests, she took one look at the jittery animals and declared that a chupacabra had claimed our land as its territory. My father told her not to fill our heads with superstition, but she ignored him and continued placing her protective charms throughout the house. The fourth incident, the one that would haunt my dreams for years, happened on a moonless night in early August. The sky was pitch black, the darkness so complete it felt like a weight. I had been sleeping fitfully in the thick summer heat when a sound woke me, a faint scratching at my window. At first, I thought it might be branches in the wind, but there was no wind that night, and there were no trees close enough to touch the house. I froze in my bed, listening. The scratching moved slowly across the glass. Then it stopped, and I heard another sound, a soft, rhythmic hissing, like strained breathing. Every part of me screamed to hide under my covers, but instead, I turned my head toward the window. At first, I saw only darkness, but as my eyes adjusted, I could make out a shape darker than the night surrounding it, pressed up against the glass. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a medium dog, but its proportions were wrong. Its head was oversized for its body, with a pointed snout, or maybe a beak. Spines or ridges ran along its back. Its limbs were long and stick-like, ending in claws that were slowly dragging across the window pane. I couldn't see its eyes until it shifted its head slightly, and then I wished I hadn't. They caught what little ambient light there was, glowing dimly red like fading coals. The creature remained there, unmoving, for what felt like forever, as if it knew I was watching it. Then, suddenly, it dropped out of sight. That's when I finally screamed. My parents and Ernesto burst into the room, and between gasping sobs, I told them what I had seen. My father went outside to investigate. All he found were strange, 3-toed prints in the soft earth beneath my window, prints that disappeared a few feet away, as if the creature had either vanished or taken flight. That night, my abuela took over. She moved my mattress into the main room, where I would sleep for the rest of the summer. She burned sage and copal in every room and placed bowls of vinegar on every windowsill, saying that chupacabras hated the smell. My father no longer argued with her. That night, I overheard him and Uncle Mateo talking quietly about reinforcing all the windows with metal screens. The final and most terrifying incident happened 3 nights later. By then, all of us were sleeping in the main room, my parents on their bed, which had been moved from their bedroom, Ernesto on the old couch, Dallas and I on mattresses laid across the floor, and Abuela Imelda in her rocking chair, refusing to sleep. Uncle Mateo kept watch on the porch. I woke to the sound of our cattle. Our lives followed the rhythm of the seasons. We grew corn, beans, and chilies as our main crops, with a small orchard peach and apple trees near the house. We also raised chickens, goats, and a few cows that graze in the eastern field. Some of my earliest memories are trailing behind my mother, Valentina, as she harvested vegetables, my tiny hands learning how to check for ripeness, my eyes trained to spot pests. By the time I was 12, I was expected to pitch in with the rest of the family. Our house sat on the northern edge of the property, a single-story structure with thick adobe walls that kept us cool in summer and held in the warmth from the wood stove during winter. Behind the house stood my father's workshop and the chicken coop. To the west were the main crop fields. To the south, the orchard, and to the east, the grazing pasture and an old barn. Beyond our land to the north lay the Morales family's property, people we rarely saw, and beyond the southern edge stretched wild desert scrubland, which eventually rose into rocky foothills. I was 15 the summer everything changed, the summer of 2006. That year had been especially dry, and we were working harder than ever just to keep the crops alive. Maybe it was the drought that drew it to our farm. Maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever the reason, that summer shattered our peaceful life. and my abuela Melda would later swear it was a doing of a chupacabra. The first strange event happened in early June. It wasn't dramatic, just eerily off in a way I couldn't put into words. I had gone out early one morning to collect eggs from the chicken coop. Normally, the chickens would be clucking and moving about, but that day they were completely silent, huddled in a corner, trembling. I figured coyote or fox had been prowling nearby and scared them, but when I checked around the coop, I didn't find any tracks. What I did find was a strange, sweet-sour smell, like rotting fruit mixed with copper. The chickens refused to leave the coop all day, and we ended up with barely half the usual number of eggs. My father carefully examined the area, but found nothing definitive. He suggested maybe a mountain lion had passed through, though he was clearly puzzled by the lack of any prints. That night, he loaded his old rifle and kept it by the door just in case. Life went on as usual for about 2 weeks. We didn't forget the chicken incident, but it faded into the background, pushed aside by the relentless demands of farm life. Then came the second incident, a small, strange thing we almost ignored at the time, but which would later seem far more important. One morning, my brother Ernesto noticed that someone or something had been in the orchard during the night. Several peaches had been picked from different trees, not in clusters as a person might harvest them, but as if individual fruits had been chosen at random throughout the orchard. What made it strange was that there were no footprints. Some of the picked peaches had come from the highest branches even my father couldn't reach without a ladder. Ernesto asked if I had been sneaking fruit. I hadn't. None of us had. My father wondered if maybe the Morales children had wandered onto our land, though that seemed unlikely. When my mother and I walked to their farm to ask, Senor Morales seemed genuinely offended by the suggestion and assured us her children had been home all night. On our way back, my mother admitted she didn't think it was children at all. She had found 3 of the missing peaches tossed near the edge of our property, each with a single, strange bite taken out of it. She showed me one she had brought with her. The bite wasn't made by human teeth. It looked more like a puncture. 2 deep holes, with smaller marks clustered around them. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. My bedroom windows faced the orchard, and I kept imagining shapes moving between the trees. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, and every rustling leaf seemed like a whisper, like something was watching and waiting. I finally fell asleep with my blanket pulled up over my head, something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. The third incident happened in mid-July, and there was no pretending it was anything normal. At the time, we had 10 goats, including 2 kids born that spring. At night, we kept them penned near the barn, with access to the eastern pasture during the day. One morning, my father went out to let them into the field as usual, but the gate to their pen was hanging open. Inside, 7 goats were huddled in a tight corner, making an awful high-pitched whine I'd never heard before. The sound made the hairs on my arm stand up. 3 goats were missing, including one of the kids. My father called for Ernesto, and they set off to search the property while my mother tried to calm the panicked animals. I stayed with her, and that's when the bellowing of our cattle filled the air in a panic. My father and uncle grabbed their rifles and rushed outside, while my mother blocked the doorway, preventing us children from following. Through the windows, we could see their flashlight beams sweeping across the property, moving toward the eastern field. Then came a sound I will never forget. A high-pitched, inhuman shriek echoed across our land. It was followed by shouts from my father and uncle, the crack of a rifle shot, and then silence. We waited in terrified suspense, not knowing what to think, until they returned nearly an hour later. My father's shirt was torn and bloody from a cut on his arm. My uncle looked shaken, his usual calm demeanor completely gone. When my mother asked what had happened, my father simply shook his head. "We'll need to call the authorities in the morning," he said. It wasn't until years later that my uncle finally told me what they had seen. They had arrived at the cattle pen to find one of our cows already dead, its body marked with the same wounds as a goat's. As they examined it, something caught their attention. In the beam of their flashlights, no more than 20 feet away, stood a creature like nothing they had ever seen. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but was the size of a large dog. Its skin was gray and hairless, and spines or quills ran along its back. Its head was oversized, with an elongated jaw full of needle-like teeth. Its eyes reflected the flashlight beams like pools of blood. But most disturbing of all were its front limbs, too long for its body, ending in three-finger hands with curved claws, dripping with dark liquid. When their lights hit it, the creature shrieked and leaped, not away, but toward them. My uncle fired, and the creature veered off, disappearing into darkness at a speed that seemed impossible. They tracked it to the southern boundary, but its tracks simply ended in the middle of open ground, as if it had vanished or taken flight. The authorities arrived the next day, but they called it an animal attack, probably a diseased coyote or feral dog. They took statements and left, clearly dismissing my family's account of what we had seen and experienced. We lost no more animals that summer. My abuela's herbs remained hanging in every doorway, and my father installed metal screens over all the windows. When September came, I returned to school, carrying with me the secret knowledge that there are things in this world that defy explanation. I am 34 now, with children of my own. We live in the city, far from my parents' farm, which they eventually sold 5 years after that summer. Sometimes, on particularly dark nights, I wake to the sound of scratching at my window, only to find nothing there. And I always sleep with my windows locked and curtains drawn. Some people say the chupacabra is just a myth, a story created to explain the mundane. Perhaps they're right, but I know what I saw that summer, what my family experienced. And on nights when the moon is new and the darkness seems alive, I wonder if it's still out there, searching for sustenance, moving silently through the desert night. I still don't know what it was with certainty, but I do know this. I will never forget the summer the chupacabra came to our farm. I'm a third-year medical student, and I want to share something that's changed my entire perspective. Until recently, I never believed in supernatural things, monsters, werewolves, skinwalkers, or any of that. I've always been a man of logic, and these things just didn't make sense to me. On the other hand, my best friend, Yen, has always been fascinated by the supernatural. He was the type of person who naturally believed in all those things. But 2 years ago, after I returned to our hometown following my first year of medical school, Yen started acting strangely. He began talking about all sorts of bizarre things that felt unlike his usual conspiracy theories. At first, I just thought he was going through a phase, but soon it became clear that something was off. Unlike me, Yen hadn't decided which college to attend, so he found a job instead. His family helped him get a position at a company called Surveillance, which specializes in installing video surveillance systems. But here's where things started to get weird. After I returned to town, Yen and I met up for a coffee to catch up. We had kept in touch through virtual chats while I was away, but it wasn't the same as seeing each other in person. During our conversation, Yen started talking about something strange. He mentioned that his boss, Miles, who owned the company, wasn't as nice as he appeared. Miles had a rule. No one was allowed to enter a specific room in his office, a room with a red door. Curious, I asked him what the deal was with the red door. Yen went on to tell me that one day when Miles was in the office, he decided to break the rule and enter that room. According to him, inside he saw something, some kind of demon. He described strange symbols and blood scattered around the room. At first, I thought he was joking, but then I looked into his eyes. The fear I saw there was real. Despite that, I still couldn't bring myself to fully believe his story. It just sounded too far-fetched. I mean, a video surveillance company owner, surrounded by cameras, has a demon locked behind a red door? It seemed like something out of a bad joke. Yen was upset that I didn't believe him, but he swore he'd get proof of his claims. Over the next 2 years, every time we spoke, he would bring up new, strange things he claimed to have seen or experienced. It didn't bother me. I just thought he was becoming obsessed with whatever it was that had gotten under his skin. But recently, something happened to me, something that made me question everything. As I mentioned, I'm a third-year medical student, and I've always wanted to be a doctor. My grandmother, who was a nurse, would tell me fascinating stories about her experiences in the hospital. She would teach me the names of bones and body parts in Latin. And by the time I started high school, I knew that medicine was my calling. Medical school, though, is no joke. From day one, it's been intense, especially the first year. That's when we tackle anatomy, a subject that many students struggle with. I spent countless hours studying muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. In the end, my hard work, combined with my grandmother's early teachings, earned me an A in anatomy. Getting an A in anatomy gave me the chance to work in the dissection hall as an assistant. This was a prestigious position, available only to top students. It allowed me to sharpen my skills while earning some extra money to help with student expenses. I lived in a small apartment near the tram station, which was about a 40-minute commute to college. The rent was cheap and the location was great, but my landlord, an older man I'll call Mr. Healthy, wasn't the easiest person to live with. He constantly complained about my lifestyle. He didn't like that I occasionally ate unhealthy food, especially greasy pizza during late-night study sessions. He wasn't a fan of my cleaning habits either. But since he rented me the apartment at such a good price, I mostly just ignored his gripes. From time to time, he'd bring me healthy vegetable lunches, which I appreciated, even if I wasn't too keen on his constant dietary lectures. My role as an anatomy assistant was to guide first-year students through the practicals, demonstrating dissection techniques and explaining anatomical structures. It was a fulfilling job, both for my knowledge and my finances. The dissection hall was in an old building next to the college, and to get to it, you had to pass through a long, narrow hallway with brown doors. It was an eerie place, old and dimly lit, but I didn't give it much thought at the time. Those doors were massive, thick wooden slabs, so heavy that just opening them felt like a bit of a workout for students. I remember the first time I saw those brown doors. They were worn and chipped, their paint peeling from years of use. And the sound they made, it was haunting. The doors groaned like a wounded animal every time they opened or closed. Behind those doors lay the dissection hall, a place that always sent chills down my spine. The air was cold and sterile, clinging to you as soon as you stepped inside, and there was always that faint, sharp smell of formaldehyde that seemed to linger on your clothes and follow you home. The room itself was lined with large metal tables, each equipped with drainage systems, and cabinets filled with preserved specimens. To put it simply, you wouldn't want to be in there alone, especially at night. I didn't work alone in the dissection hall. I was under the supervision of someone I refer to as Mr. B, a seasoned anatomy instructor who had been at the university for many years. Mr. B was a strange man. Don't get me wrong. He was brilliant and incredibly knowledgeable, but there was always something off about him. I always felt uneasy around him, like a constant chill down my spine. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was unsettling. His gaze would linger far too long, whether on students' cadavers or even on me. Once, I caught him whispering to a preserved hand in a specimen jar. I quickly brushed it off, attributing it to my lack of sleep, but the unease lingered. Despite his oddities, I admired his skill. He taught me dissection techniques that weren't even in textbooks, showing me tricks for revealing delicate nerve branches or hidden muscle layers. To him, anatomy wasn't just a science. It was an art form, and for that, I respected him deeply. But his approach to dissection was, well, peculiar. I'm not one to judge, but getting so emotionally invested in cutting up dead bodies seemed off. Mr. Healthy, my landlord, had a theory about Mr. B. He'd often say, Mr. B is a divorced man. Well, loneliness can drive a person to madness. Maybe anatomy is his escape from a harsh reality. He'd go on with his usual life advice. Find a girl, get married, don't end up like him, okay? I dismiss his theories, but in a way, Mr. Healthy might have had a point. Mr. B was pushing 40, divorced, with no children. God knows if he had any friends outside of work. Perhaps anatomy and those cadavers were his only escape from a life that didn't seem to offer him much comfort. Unfortunately, the strange vibe surrounding Mr. B turned out to be more than just my imagination. You see, I didn't always study at my apartment. Sometimes I'd go to the college library. It had comfortable chairs and rare books I could only access while studying there. In today's digital age, one might argue that everything's available online, but I've always been a bookworm, someone who enjoys the tactile feel of reading printed materials. So, the library became my go-to place. One evening, I stayed late at the library, preparing for an important pathology exam. After finishing my study session, I gathered my things and left. But as I passed the old building with the dissection hall, I noticed something strange. The lights were still on inside. I thought, what's Mr. B doing in there so late? Maybe it was a janitor cleaning up, I reasoned. But then curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check it out. As I approached the building, I figured Mr. B was just preparing for the next day's lesson, maybe organizing specimens. I wasn't nervous at first, but when I got closer, I noticed that the heavy brown doors leading into the section hall were slightly open. I heard strange sounds coming from inside. Wet, squelching noises, like someone chewing on something thick and juicy. My curiosity piqued, and I've worked at a small local flower shop for a little over a year now. My boyfriend, Sebastian, his mom, Elizabeth, and I run the place. Sebastian's usually at the register, greeting customers and helping them with whatever they need, while I'm in the back working on bouquets, taking care of the flowers and handling special requests when they come up. Elizabeth, the shop's owner, is the one who handles the tedious stuff like paperwork. I've never had a job I actually look forward to until now. I enjoy working with flowers, and I love the different scents that fill the shop throughout the day. Plus, I get to work alongside people I care about. It's a peaceful job, one that keeps me grounded. But a couple of months ago, I noticed something strange. Every time I'd walk to the front of the shop and open the door to go to the back, there would be this peculiar smell lingering in the air for just a few seconds before it disappeared. Now, I know a flower shop isn't exactly going to smell like roses all the time, but trust me when I say this scent was different. At first, I couldn't figure out, but after a few days, I realized it was the smell of balloon flowers, Platycodon grandiflorus, if you want to be fancy about it. They're a type of flower that's usually blue, purple, or white, and they don't have a strong scent unless you crush the petals. That's why it took me so long to pinpoint it. We had these flowers in the shop, particularly at the end of the back section, where we kept them for customers who wanted to plant them in flower beds or rock gardens. But the weird part was I could smell them even when I wasn't near them. It was just a strange little detail I noted in my mind at the time, but I didn't think much of it. Over the next few weeks, though, things started to feel off. I'd get these sudden chills in the air, or sometimes I'd catch a whiff of something rotting or decaying. The whole vibe of the shop felt different. Sebastian seemed to notice it too. When I asked him about it, he told me he'd started smelling something burning in the back a few times a day. At first, he'd check it out, but after a week of it happening, he stopped bothering. I'm back there working, so if something was burning, I'd notice, he said. Things took a turn for the worse after that, not just for our mental health, but for the business too. Some of the flowers near the back section, and even the ones at the front, started to rot and wither at an unnaturally fast rate. Elizabeth would water the plants in pots in the morning, and by the time Sebastian opened the shop, some of the flowers were already dying. I'd leave for a break, and when I came back, the flowers I had been working on looked sickly and depressing. Elizabeth started inspecting the plants herself, checking the buds, the soil, even the boxes they came in. But no matter how hard she looked, there was no sign of anything wrong with the flowers. She was just as unsettled as the rest of us. The strange smells grew worse, more intense, and sometimes a part of the shop would feel like someone had opened a window during a snowstorm, bringing in a blast of icy cold air. But the creepiest thing happened when Sebastian told me he thought he was hearing someone talking. He said he'd hear a faint, hushed voice when the store was quiet, like mindless, erratic whispering. It was so soft they could be drowned out by any other sound in the shop, but he swore he heard it. At this point, I was starting to get really freaked out. My mind was running wild, piecing together all these strange occurrences and imagining all sorts of horrifying scenarios about what could be happening to us or to the shop. Elizabeth, despite brushing off her concerns with lighthearted remarks, seemed deeply aware of what was going on. That became even more apparent one day when Sebastian and I walked into the shop to find it decorated with every kind of spirit-warding technique you could think of. There were black, purple, and white crystals scattered among the flower pots, and paper sigils and chants were plastered across the wooden coffered ceiling. Rosemary and thyme hung from every corner, and the back of the shop was draped with cloth balls hanging from every angle. Sebastian protested weakly, calling it stupid and overkill, but there was no conviction in his voice. Deep down, we both secretly hoped that whatever Elizabeth was doing would work. And to our surprise, it did. From that day on, the weird smells stopped. No more cold spots. No more whispering. The shop felt normal again. Things have been fine ever since, and I truly hope they stay that way. But a part of me knows that whatever was lurking in the shadows of our little flower shop is still out there. It's me, a truck driver from the heart of rural Virginia. I recently got a call from the post office in Pounding Mill, asking if I could help deliver some of their heavier packages. The boss gave the green light, and guess who got the job? Yep, me lucky, right? And not like I'd been doing anything other than twiddling my thumbs in the depot, waiting for something to happen. Gizmo, my cat, was safely curled up in my cab, probably sleeping as he usually does during these late-night shifts that stretch into early morning. I liked this time of night. It was peaceful, with only the crickets, owls, and bats for company. The night was a melody, a relaxing background to the winding roads to the mountains. Fireflies dotted the air, lighting up the rivers and forests beyond our small towns. The cool summer wind rushed through my open window, adding to my tranquility. That was before I cursed myself by getting a call from my boss, yelling my name from his office. With sarcasm dripping in every word, I headed over to the local post office. I left Gizmo in the cab with food, water, and his litter box. He was fine. He hardly noticed when I was gone these days. Inside the post office, I grabbed a set of keys left for me, and then I climbed into the well-worn postal truck they had ready. It was a small-town job, so helping out wherever needed wasn't unusual. I set up the GPS. Most of the packages were for people living up on mountain paths, roads that rarely saw any traffic. These outlying areas always confused me since I had no reason to travel those roads until now. The last time I'd ventured out, there was a couple of years ago when I helped with a landslide that trapped an elderly woman. I was already tired, thanks to Gizmo's insistence on playtime earlier. But Red Bull, Monster, and a 5-hour energy drink kept me going, at least until the inevitable crash hit. I started with deliveries in town, which were uneventful. A few newspaper deliveries, but otherwise, the streets were empty. One delivery did catch my eye. Nothing wrong with admiring a beautiful woman, right? Soon, I found myself on the outskirts of town. My trusty GPS led me down winding, narrow roads that were little more than dirt paths, covered in years of leaves. The houses were old, not well maintained, as expected for these isolated areas. It wasn't until I got to a road named Raven's Nest that things took a turn. The house that was white, though a bit yellowed from age and the elements. It sat on a large plot of land, maybe 10 acres. I couldn't be sure, but it seemed huge. I wasn't used to large spaces. I spent most of my time in my truck. After all, the package I had for this house was unusual. Solid wood, maybe oak or spruce. It was heavy, oddly shaped, and the tape on the box ripped as I moved it. Museum Hauntings, the Yangiam Chicken Break Room story. It looked like a coffin, but I wasn't about to ask questions. I loaded it back onto the dolly, huffing and puffing as I dragged up the stairs to the porch. I was out of breath by the time I reached the door, only to find no doorbell. I had to use an old knocker instead, which felt straight out of a horror show. I half expected to be greeted by a hidden camera, but instead, a beautiful woman opened the door. She was taller than me, though that wasn't saying much, since I'm only 5 feet 5 inches. But she was stunning. She had long black hair with a hint of purple at the tips, and the darkest blue eyes I'd ever seen. For a moment, I was breathless. "Thanks. I've been waiting on this hope chest forever," she said quietly. I blinked. "A what? Oh, it's not a coffin," I asked jokingly. She frowned, clearly unamused. "It's a hope chest. People keep quilts, blankets, sometimes clothes in them. Pretty old-fashioned, but I like it." Feeling my earlier attempt at flirting fall flat, I try to keep it cool. "Can you help me bring it in?" "I don't have anything to move it with," she said, gesturing to the dolly. I hesitated. Technically, I wasn't supposed to go inside, but she seemed so embarrassed that I couldn't say no. We went inside, and she thanked me profusely. "By the way, I've got some deer meat in my basement freezer. Would you like some as a thank you?" I should have remembered every horror movie ever. Don't go into someone's basement. But I was too distracted by her looks. Against my better judgment, I went with her down the stairs. The basement was awful. It looked burnt with collapsed shelves and pipes hanging from the ceiling. The smell hit me, a horrible mix of rot and mold. I felt my stomach turn. I barely made it to the bottom step when I realized I shouldn't have come. I turned back, only to find the door at the top locked. She was laughing at me from behind the door. "You're so stupid," she said. I pounded on the door, hurting my hand in the process. Panic set in. I looked around for another way out, but I had left my phone in the truck. I was trapped. The smell of smoke began to fill the room, and I saw plumes rising from the broken pipes. A flicker of flame appeared in the vents, and without thinking, I grabbed a chunk of wood from the shelves and slammed it into a window. I climbed through, despite the cuts and bruises, and bolted for my truck. I didn't even look back at the woman as I sped away, her voice yelling behind me that it was just a joke. I made it to the clinic before I passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, I had 12 stitches in my hand and was told they'd had to pry 20 shards of glass out of me. My hand was fractured. I wouldn't be driving for a while. The police investigated, but there was no sign of the woman. It turned out nobody had lived in that house since 2004. They found the burnt basement and the hope chest. Turns out it was actually a coffin. It would have been my coffin if not for that quick thinking with the window. I got vacation time to recover, and I spent it fishing with Gizmo by a nice lake. And let me tell you, never go into someone's basement, no matter how beautiful they are or how convincing their smile is. Trust me on this. I request you to please like my video and subscribe my channel, and give your remarks in comment section. It will motivate me to give you best true stories.